Well, I thought this morning, let's look at a couple verses in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6. Matthew 6, 22 and 23. Following in the vein of what we did last week, which was picking a verse that is intriguing to me, and I've always felt like it's a little bit mysterious. We did that last week with the where Paul's saying everything's yours. Paul and Apollos and life and death and the world, it's all yours. You know, that you get the sense there's a depth there in what he's saying, and so that's what we explored. So in that same vein, today I want us to look at this statement in Matthew 6, 22 and 23. It's intriguing, but it's also one that kind of raises some questions. What exactly is Jesus talking about? What does he mean? So here's what he says. The eye is the lamp of the body. So then if your eye is clear, your whole body is full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Let me read it a second time, just kind of think about it. Mm-hmm. The eye is the lamp of the body. So then, if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? All right. Any ideas about what he might be talking about? We're in Matthew 6, 22 and 23.
All right, thank you.
Any thoughts about the eye is a lamp of the body? What is he talking about? You know, what's that alluding to? The light within us.
Other spiritual teachers use the phrase cleaning the lens.
Right.
That's kind of what this reminds me of. It's like, I don't know, it's the part that we look through is important. How we, I guess, you know, I don't understand it completely, but.
No, I think you're headed in the right direction. I think he's talking about the power of perception.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh.
My perspective, my perception,
Yeah.
and how I conceive the world itself, and I guess even down to do I have hope or not in that.
Yeah, so it seems like he's not talking as much about the way things are, but somewhat about the way I perceive them.
How you see.
How I see them. And that can make, in some ways, all the difference in the world.
Luke references this same message, but at the beginning, before he gets into the eyes, lamp of the body, he says that no one lights a lamp and puts it in a cellar. Instead, he puts it on a stand so those who enter can see the light. So he starts there.
Yeah, which in the Sermon on the Mount is a little bit earlier in the Sermon on the Mount. You had that idea earlier about light in chapter 5. Yeah. So the way you're putting it, yeah, the way Luke puts it, the way Matthew is using that saying. So it's something to do with perception, right?
So the message says, I just pulled it up that I have. If your eyes are windows into your body. If you open your eyes wide and wonder and believe, your body fills up with light. If you live squinty-eyed in greed and distrust, your body is a musty cellar. If you pull the blinds on your windows, what a dark life you will have.
Yeah, Peterson's really.
That lid lift was worth it.
Yeah, that Peterson's way of paraphrasing it to say this is the essence of what he's saying. Okay, so it's about subjectivity, not objectivity, not what is reality, but the role I had in shaping that reality. I mean, see, it sounds like that's largely what Jesus is saying at this point in these remarks is you have a role to play in how you perceive things, how things come to you or don't come to you, right? You're determining a lot of that, right?
Is that in a way attitude, a little, or not?
Yeah, perception and attitude is kind of a disposition one might take. I could take a very contrary sort of attitude, or a hermeneutic of suspicion and distrust about everything. It sounds like Peterson a little bit, if you don't trust it. It was like, what a, dreary life you'll lead, right? Right? So, yeah, so I would say attitude's part of it. What else do you notice?
Well, just piggybacking on, because I mean, there's a lot of said about this today, but, not only are you are what you love, you become what you love, you become what your attention is focused on. So, we live, it's overstated that we live in an attention economy, but we live in an attention. Everything is about attention, right? And so, even, we're choosing good, better, best on attentiveness. So it really, I think about this as, it's a call to sort of the contemplative gaze of how, so not only from a mystical, spiritual point of view, but I mean, there's a lot in neuroscience about neuroplasticity of the brain. Your brain is formed based on what you pay attention to, right? So that's subjectivity also.
Right. Yeah. John David?
Piggybacking off of I can't speak about neuroplasticity. There's the sort of bad eye of looking at social media with this lens of comparing myself to others, or, oh no, they've got more, or their life's better, or their filtered experience looks more meaningful than mine, as opposed to looking at that same social media platform with gratitude for your friendships and celebrating their successes, etc. There's a rabbi who once, and I can't remember his name, but I think it's a very modern rabbi, who said, if you look for a yellow convertible, you'll find it. And the message was about seeking gratitude in all circumstances, in essence. I mean, not in a Pauline way, this rabbi, but I liked that because it was this good eye kind of lens. Like, you're on the same road, but if you really seek it out, you can find the stuff that's meaningful and beneficial if you choose to do it. Perception.
Yeah. So it in a lot of ways, it's an empowering sort of statement. It's not saying, well, you're simply the victim of circumstances beyond your control. Jesus seems to be saying, you have some agency, to use that kind of terminology. You have some power to choose what it is you focus on, right? What it is you're looking for, and then what you look for, you tend to find, right? So
I got another way of looking into it. It's tied into the ideas both in Psalms and Ephesians about the eyes and ears of our heart. And in Paul's prayer in Ephesians 1, he says, I pray that he would grant you a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of God, that your eyes of your heart would be enlightened, so that you would know what is the hope of your calling, the riches of your inheritance, the surpassing greatness of his power. So it's like that, the eye is tied to our relationship with God and the Holy Spirit, who's the revealer of truth.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off that, it says the eye is clear. It used to be a phrase my mother would say, he's clear-eyed, meaning that you're looking at it through wisdom. you know, not through bigotry or, you know, all of those other things, that you're looking at it as it is.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and the, you know, part of what Colby's bringing up as well is, so there's the subjectivity, there's the empowerment, and yet that is not obviously separated from the working of God, because there's Paul praying that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened. So it's something that both we engage and we make choices, but yet we realize ultimately it has to be a prayer offered up to God. Make my eyes clear, help me to see, help me to be filled with the light.
And the prayer is not to be deceived by Satan.
Right, yeah, and the prayer is not to be deceived. Now notice the context in which these two verses lie. So look at 20, 21, and 24. So these two little verses are plopped in the middle of something. 20, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Then our little phrase. Then he says, 24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Sometimes it's easy to look at these passages as if they're all like individualized, autonomous statements, like wisdom sayings just falling out randomly without any sort of linking or continuity. I think there's very much continuity. So what do you notice? Before he talks about the eye being a lamp, he talks about, well, he talks about your possessions and what it is you're valuing. And then afterwards, he goes back to that subject, right? So if he was talking about that before, where your treasure is, then he talks about this bit about the eye and the light that comes in or doesn't come in, and then he goes back to the subject he had been talking about previously. So that tells us that the discussion of 22 and 23, and it's along the lines of what we're saying, it reinforces the idea, it's what you're valuing, what you're looking at, how you're perceiving things, the choices you're making. Because 20, 21, and 24 are very much about the choices you make. What do you align yourself with? That's the challenge he's putting out there. What do you align yourself with? What do you look at? What do you seek after? What is important to you? And so then you have this somewhat little cryptic bit in the middle that's very poetic, right?
I think John David made first of all, what was it, yellow something?
Yellow convertible.
Yellow convertible.
Convertible.
I think that's what I said.
That's sticking with me. I can't get it out of my head.
I didn't know what the yellow thing was, so now.
Yeah, if you look for them, the thing is, if you look for them, you'll see them.
Yeah.
Like if you start looking for Kias, you'll start seeing all the Kias on the road. Well, there's another Kia. But if you're not looking for Kias, you might drive past all these Kias and not even notice that there was a Kia, right?
Well, that's funny, because that's where I was going is that, you know, our eyes are great deceivers. And, you know, older crowd here, you know, you think you see a chipmunk that just ran, it's really a floater in your eye that just came in front. Not fair. Although at our house, it may have been a chipmunk. But where I was going with John David, though, is whether you look at social media as poor pitiful me, look at everything else, probably the way you should look at it is with gratitude for what you have, and then grateful for what your friends have or the blessings that they have. And I know, you know, trying to be better at that so that you aren't jealous, because the eye's jealous, and that's one of the 7 deadly, 8 deadly if you count one before you eliminated the one. But how do we get better at that, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, John David's example was very practical. Like the same stuff is presented there, but how I look at it can be so very different. How I'm viewing it. Is it, oh, I'm so happy for them, or is it like, oh, my life just doesn't compare. Look what they're doing, right? It's the exact same information, the same data as it were, but how I'm interacting with it. So that's a great example. Now, the good question, I'll go to Daryl and then let's pick up Alan's question. How do we then get better at that?
And I think I got an answer.
Okay.
Okay, I'm thinking that if we actually, see, I'm gonna tell you something I don't do that I think would help, is that if God is infused in everything, then I think somehow there's a way in which the whole, my whole worldview and the way I perceive things changes to the better.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what Jesus is saying, because, you know, he says, look, here's the options. Your whole body can be full of light, or your whole body can be full of darkness. And what's the difference? The way in which you look at things. Right? That's literally what Jesus is saying. He said, and then he says, if it's full of darkness, how great is that darkness? I mean, just think of if the light you have is in fact darkness, what a mess you're in. It's like the message. That's just miserable. You know, think of where you are. The light you have is darkness itself. But he's putting it back to the hearer. You have an option, right? It's just like he said previously. Where's your treasure? What are you looking for? Where do you put your heart?
AI is trying to figure out how to serve that up to you how you want it to.
Yeah, all kinds of algorithms will figure out what it is you seem to click on and give you more of that. Right? Yeah, John did?
What about, to try to answer your question, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I really enjoy the seasons in which I'm really flexing the examine muscle, the spiritual discipline examine, which is you, at the end of every day, you sort of try your hardest to divorce yourself from the day and say, what went wrong today? Okay, well, I didn't do this right. This could have gone better. I shouldn't have cut this guy off in traffic. I shouldn't, whatever. Then the second question is maybe more important, although I think they're both important. But you start asking yourself, where was God in the day that just happened? Where did I see him at work? And the reason I like it over time is the more you start to flex that muscle, the more you'll catch yourself when you're about to do something you don't want to do. But also, the greater frequency, you'll start looking for God moving in ways that you weren't looking for before.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're looking for the yellow convertible, you'll see it. And I like the way Richard Rohr talks about it. He says negative things are like Velcro, and positive things are like Teflon. What happens in our lives? Everything negative just sticks, and you can't hardly rip it off. Now, something good slips away. It's just Teflon coat. It is gone in a second. If we don't make the effort, right, we will just kind of naturally hang on to all the negatives, and that's all I'll see is the miserable, the dark, the trouble, everything that didn't go right. But if I really exercise that muscle of gratitude, of saying, where was God? What went well? Realizing those things tend to slip away so easily. Right? Like I've heard the statistic, who knows if it's true, but the statistic in parenting, like one criticism is equal to 10 compliments. Like if you're not constantly building up your children, they will hear when you criticize them. And what are they going to remember? Not all the times you said, oh, you did that so well. But the one time you said, you know, you just really screwed that up. Right? There's something about us as human beings, we tend to hold to the negative. So I like what you're talking about. It takes some intentional practice for gratitude, for seeing the presence of God, for finding the light in the darkness, to use his, what Jesus is talking about, there's plenty of darkness I can let in, but if I'm looking for the light, he seems to be saying your whole body can be filled with that. But you're going to have to look for it, because you tend not to do that as a human being. You tend to focus on the negative. I would say for evolutionary reasons of self-preservation. Like I would say, if you're, ancient Homo sapiens, you'd better be looking for the negative. That's the saber-toothed tiger that'll eat you. If you're admiring butterflies and not noticing the danger, you won't survive. It's like evolution has adapted us to noticing the negative and focusing on it, and putting aside the beautiful, because you can't get distracted. Life and death is in the balance, right? So I use that as an analogy to say, well, why is it that we focus on the negative? Survival. That's what kept us from getting eaten by the predators.
Scarcity.
Yeah, we notice the negative and we were attuned to watching out for danger. We weren't attuned to watching out for beauty. So we have to work at looking out for the beautiful. If that makes some sense. It's a simplistic example, but maybe it goes in that direction. Okay, let me take Alan, then I'll come to Jenny.
The yellow convertible stuck with me, and do that. So I'm going to give you one to stick with too. And Dave Eldridge, attended here for many, many years, passed away, gosh, in a couple of years now, would do some workshops and seminars. He had done a lot of public speaking and that kind of stuff. And one of the things he used made me think about this, focusing on the negative with the teenagers, and it probably was adapted from that, but I give Dave the credit, so you give Dave the credit as well, and you use it. But it's a toilet flush. You flush the toilet, there's it immediately drains all love, was the toilet flush. And what does it take? 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or whatever for it to refill. And a lot of times he would take that same analogy and use the human heart. You puncture the heart, and then it's going to drain immediately. But you can also kill with lots of arrows into the body. So I don't know that there's a positive way to look at spin this. So, but the point simply is, don't flush your relationships, because it takes a long time to fill that tank.
Oh, okay. Jenny?
I don't remember who said, how do we get better at this? But then you said a word a while ago that practice. That's what we have to do to get better at it, is to just practice it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to wake up one morning noticing all the good and beautiful. I wish I could just I wish I could just change my mindset and wake up and I'm a different person. But yeah, it does mean I've got to practice. I've got to work at it. I've got to make effort. And I think that's what, again, in the context, Jesus is saying, well, there's these things that moth and rust corrupt and thieves can steal. And what's your problem? You tend to, and he said a little bit earlier, that's what all the Gentiles, that's what all the nations are fixed on. What am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? These things perish with time anyway. But it's hard work to say, look for the kingdom things, right? Seek the kingdom thing. Well, that takes effort, right? Jim, you had a thought, and then from the Marsh.
Yeah, I had a question, and this discussion's kind of answered it, and it was, when you were saying look at the context of the verse, in verse 25, he went to for this reason. I mean, so it's kind of like all this stuff I'm saying, for this reason, I'm telling you not to be worried. I was going, well, how does this really relate to not being worried? And it seems that, my first instinct of a kid is saying, hey, I'm worried about it, is to try to calm them by saying, don't be worried, it'll all be okay. But maybe a more effective way to say, don't be worried, is to say, okay, let's, as Jimmy said, let's practice looking at a different way of viewing this. It's not saying don't be worried. It's, okay, let's focus on, you know, depending on the situation, but what he's looking at, am I loving money? Okay, well then I'm focused, I don't have enough, right? Am I looking at things with my eyes that are full of darkness, meaning I'm not training my eyes? Well, when I'm doing that, I'm gonna have worry, right? So I need to be looking at the right things. Is my heart focused on things that aren't gonna really last? Well, if I do, I'm worried about those things. Well, then let's focus on the things that do last. And you can kind of go all the way up through that list of what he was just talking about. And so really he's saying, don't worry. And the reason you're going to do that is if you practice these better ways of looking at things. And it kind of he's kind of concluding that with, it is about worry. And maybe that's part of the human condition is worry. It saved us. It's evolutionary. But it also kills us, right? Because it keeps us from being as we were made in God's image.
Yeah, a certain amount of worry. There was a rabbi who was a counselor who watched some videos. He's passed away, but some counseling work I did, we watched a lot of his videos. He was so very good. And his statement was, to be alive is to be anxious. He was not going to criticize anyone for being anxious. If you're alive, unless you're dead, you're going to have some anxiety. The question he wanted to say, is it acute or is it chronic? Those are problems. But you can't, I shouldn't have any anxiety. Well, you're alive, aren't you? Life is anxious, right? He was kind of saying it's okay that there's some worry. The question is it all consuming? Is it sapping you of everything good? Is it paralyzing you? And I think Jesus would be saying something similar. It's like, are you going to be overcome with worry? Is this going to be so all-pervasive that all you can think about is, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? He says, look at the lilies. It's going to work out. But he's not criticizing you should never have a concern. You have children, you have friends, you have loved ones going through difficult times. There's lots of things that concern us. So, yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, the way the whole next section, which is the lilies of the field, the birds of the air, and the part about eat, drink, he's for this reason. So somehow that's based on what he's already discussed. Yeah. That's why I think it's important to see that all of this flows. It's not like little snippets. He decided to talk about this, and then he decided to talk about something else. How did his progression of thought flow from one to the other? Okay, Marcia had something, and then we'll come to Bob.
Well, what Kenny was saying about practice, I thought John David gave a practical way to do that every day.
Yeah.
That's how you'll get better at it every night, reviewing those things, and that gives you the practice you need. Hopefully, as time goes on, you'll see God in different things about it.
Yeah, you get more accustomed, because I think with that practice, the things that went wrong today, those things will come to mind quickly.
Quickly, right.
And then you're going to think, now, where did I see God? What? And you might have to at first really, did I see God anywhere? You have to work at it to say, oh, wait a minute, I really did, right? So, and I think the order, and I think that practice comes from the Jesuits, does it not, Examen or Ignatian spirituality? So it's, the order I think is important, is you start with the native because that's easy, but then you go to where was God, and then the last part of that practice is then you just, in a contemplative manner, imagine yourself in the presence of God, being loved by God, in a kind of, no words to be said, you're just, you picture yourself as being embraced by God, at peace with God. After having reviewed your day, you end the day with, but I'm loved by God, right? Yeah, good practical thing. Yeah, Bob?
Well, if we look at wisdom as having a clear eye, and we look at ignorance as viewing things through a glass darkly, it seems to me that what we're looking at is, in one scenario, to a greater degree, an absence of faith, than in another one, a more or a greater perspective in how faith interacts with our lives to make us more wise. But those things are all from God. And being from God, other people have suggested, well, how can I? Well, the bottom line is I can't do it at all. And so it'll all come back to prayer and I would say some degree of vigilance by not doing necessarily the right thing, but actively trying to avoid the wrong.
The part I can do without God's help is the wrong thing. The part I can't do without God's help is the right thing. So, you said it well. Yeah, I have to be vigilant against my tendencies to do it the wrong way. Open and receptive to God helping me to do it the right way. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to, on my own, apart from God, somehow clean the lens, right? Have clear eyes. But at the same time, I have a role to play. God is not going to force me to look at things as I ought to if I'm just determined to keep looking at them in the way that is not helpful. Right? If I keep doom scrolling social media, right? There's a reason it's called doom scrolling, right? It's a very negative thing. If I keep doom scrolling social media, how's God going to, give me a lighter sense of being and His presence? He can't, because I'm just in this habit of scrolling in this kind of, it's this constant litany of negativity, or at least that I'm taking it in a negative way. So yeah, it is an act of faith. In a lot of ways, to see God present is an act of faith, right? If I'm going to look at my day and examine it and say, where was God present? It's going to take an act of faith to say, I believe God showed up here. Because for most of the time, it's not going to be, He showed up so obviously that it was clearly apparent and I could not believe otherwise, right? That's not usually how my day goes. I have to be willing to see God's presence rather than to doubt God's presence, right? When I review things, was God present? Well, yeah, this was where I could see God as having been present, if I'm open to that possibility. So yeah, I like your thoughts, Bob. It is an act of faith as well. I don't know, another minute, we got 1 minute. Closing thought, closing observation?
The consider the lilies and birds stuff. I heard a few months back that someone was using that as the anchor for Jesus's call to generosity and Jesus' generosity himself. Jesus was generous, God is generous. How can I prove that? Look at the lilies and look at the birds. It was a really fascinating connection, and I think it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this way of looking at that. The first Bible that God wrote was creation.
First revelation, yep.
Yeah, the first revelation of God is creation. And really, if we learn to look at creation, we would see everything we need to know about God, right? So it's kind of the second Bible is the one written by inspired authors. But the first one, His first message to us, His first word to us was in creation. Maybe it's because we're so poor at reading that book that now we've got another one that tells us to read the first one. The heavens declare the glory of God, the psalmist says. Why aren't you guys reading the first book you got? Right? That's the book of God's revelation, was how He made things. Right? So yeah, the generosity of God, that you are loved, that things are held in a kind of harmonious unity, all of that is apparent. Kabi, you get the last word.
I love the phrase, which appears in other places, not how much more. It's an art. I've heard it said, the argument from the lesser to the greater. If He loves the birds this much, how much more? Or there's a parable over in Luke, if the unjust judge, if he's willing, then how much more?
Yeah.
And I think God is so much more than anything we can imagine, that He's trustworthy.
Yeah, and that Jesus uses the same phrase, if you, being evil as you are, know how to give good gifts, how much more does your Father in heaven? Yeah, so it's always, you read the book of creation and you see, and then you realize, but this is only a partial example of the full goodness of God. Like if that is apparent in this very physical way, how much more must it not be true in a spiritual reality? Yeah, that's a beautiful note to finish on. So, yeah, that's what Jesus is, it seems to me in these two verses. If you can see clearly, you'll be full of light. But if you don't, you're going to be full of darkness. And that's going to be dark. Right? So I've got a role to play. How do I position myself to be full of light? All right. Well, hope you can stay if you can for the meal.